How's it going, and welcome back to the channel, Vaqueros. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the next installment in my little new mini series I'm going to be calling the Never Aim Again series. And this is basically for Hipfire builds only, and this is really technically supposed to be episode 3, I guess, if you think about it, because the first one I ever did was the shotgun build in Modern Warfare 2 with all the super tight hipfire spreads that eventually got nerfed. Then last week I did the Lachmann Sub hipfire build, and now we're doing the ISO 45. Now the ISO 45 is classified by many people as sort of the meta SMG. This is sort of the best overall because of the damage at range and how good it can be up close. So it's a very solid SMG, but personally, I never really liked this gun much at all. It just feels weird. The recoil pattern is a little off to me sometimes. I don't know why. It's just a preference thing. And also the iron sights are absolute garbage and I do not like using them. So what better candidate for a hipfire build than a gun with crappy iron sights like the ISO 45? Because again, this is a hipfire only build, but you can aim down sights if you want to, if you're pushing range a little bit. It's totally up to you, but I just kind of find it funny to just hit fire from really ridiculous ranges because hey, it's all about fun and that's what these builds are for generally. So here is my ISO 45 hipfire only build, and this is brought to you by the Warzone Loadout Community app. I love it. It's such a great app and I highly encourage you guys to go check it out if you haven't yet. If you want, you can follow me, because if one thing I notice is that I generally upload the weapon classes before my video comes on that class, so it gives you a little bit of a sneak peek as to what's coming from my next video generally. So I highly recommend checking that app out. Now, this ISO 45 build, as you can see, a lot of fun attachments that are focused primarily on hipfire spread. Now, the main things you want to focus on are hipfire recoil control and hipfire spread in game. On sim.gg, these stats are basically called minimum and maximum hipfire spread and also moving hipfire spread. Now, the video where I talk about the Lachmann hipfire build, I went over those a lot more in depth, so check out that video if you need a little bit more insight. But basically, the minimum hipfire spread is when you are standing still. When you're about to shoot, that's when it's basically the tightest. That's your minimum hipfire spread. Max is basically when you move around or when you're basically shooting. You'll notice that the hipfire reticle opens up. That is your maximum hipfire spread. And then moving, of course, is when you're strafing around left and right. That is going to be your moving hipfire spread. And that is generally helped by hipfire recoil control attachments, which generally tend to be small stocks or collapsible stocks or no stock attachments and things like that. But then there's great attachments like the lasers, like the Point G3P laser or the Grimline laser, which really help your spread overall. They help moving, max, and min, and those are generally the best attachments for hipfire builds. One of the funny things about this build is that it actually has a tighter moving hipfire spread than your normal hipfire spread. So if you move around, your hipfire spread actually gets smaller than if you're just kind of stationary or moving slowly. So it kind of encourages you to move around a little bit more. It's not by a whole massive amount, but you'll notice if you move around, it slightly shrinks, which is actually kind of funny, I gotta say. Now, as always, the magic icing for this build is going to be that underbarrel attachment, because we are going to be using the VX Pineapple, and this is one of 3 underbarrel grips you can use. The VX Pineapple is one, the Cronin Groove Shot is, I believe, the other one, and the Bruin Warrior Grip. Now, all these are great attachments that basically help the same amount in terms of your hipfire spread, and you can tune them accordingly. But basically, with the VX Pineapple, it gives you the best recoil control out of all of them. So that's generally what I go for, because the other ones help about the same, and they might give you a little bit more or less aim down sight speed. And I prefer having just great recoil overall, because with these builds, generally you're going to be rocking a small barrel that hurts recoil, a stock that hurts recoil. So it kind of helps offset all of that by having something that gives you a little bit better recoil control. I'd rather have that than aim down sight speed, to be honest, since these builds are already going to be very speedy. So generally, the VX Pineapple, if you want it, it's the one for recoil control. I highly recommend this one over the other two, just in my opinion. Now, if we compare this to the other build I did with the hipfire builds, which is the Lachmann Sub, I do want to point out a few things. First of all, the Lachmann Sub generally is going to be the faster hipfire build of the two, and the movement speeds in general just seem to be on average a little bit higher. Now, the thing that separates the ISO from the Lachmann and a lot of the other SMGs is its time to kill once you start getting at further ranges still actually comes out on top in most cases. Like if you compare the Lachmann Sub with the ISO at about 10 meters or so, you're going to see that the ISO kills almost 100 milliseconds faster. So even though this is a hipfire build, you are going to notice that at ranges, if you are hipfiring, that the ISO will kill slightly faster. But overall, I would say that the Lachmann Sub, in my opinion, just felt a lot easier to control. Even though on paper it looks like the ISO 45 technically has less visual kick and recoil. The Lachmann Sub's pattern is a lot easier to kind of handle, and I felt a lot more comfortable with the Lachmann Sub in my hands than the ISO when it came to this Hipfire build. But I can't deny the ISO's incredible stopping power and how versatile it really can be. As for my thoughts on this build, well, it basically turns Warzone into easy mode. I kid you not, my KD has consistently gone up when I've been using this Hipfire build. I'm a controller player. I know a lot of mouse and keyboard players generally prefer Hipfire builds, so that's good, but I think that with controllers rotational aim assist, it helps them just as much. I promise you it's still very, very good on controller. And man, every time I use these builds, I'm always surprised how good they are, and my KD just kind of goes up. It's kind of ridiculous, but I love it. I love this build. It's very fun, but again, I prefer the Lachmann Sub overall. It just feels better. I like it. I like the iron sights better. Everything about it just feels so much more natural to me than the ISO 45, despite the ISO 45 being in a lot of ways better just because of how much damage you can do at range and how much more efficient the time to kill is in those longer ranges. And that is pretty much going to do it for this video, guys. So I hope you like this next installment of the Never Aim Again series, as I'm going to call it. Now, let me know down below in the comments. I'm curious, what other kind of gun should I try it on? Because I've been doing a lot of SMGs. Those generally have the best hipfire spreads out of all the guns, except maybe shotguns. But should I try it with some of the ARs? Should I try it with some of the LMGs or something ridiculous like the Lachmann 762, which I have thought about? Just let me know what you guys think about that, and let me know what you think of this video and the other videos. Next video is going to be back to shotguns. I'm going to talk about my favorite shotgun build in the game, and probably on paper and in practice, really, one of the best shotguns you can use in Warzone currently. So if that sounds good to you, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more content like that on this channel. And with all that being said, guys, I will see you in the next video.